Hi everyone. I hope you all are doing well. I'm Runang Pawar and I welcome you all to today's event on navigating a career in product management. So I'm really excited to host this session organized by Club Tech Brewers, which is a community that we have started to empower students and working professionals to learn, connect, and build together. So this is a diverse community, and we have folks from various interest groups, may it be web development, app development, AR/VR, cybersecurity, product management, and this is our first ever product management event that we are having at Club Tech Brewers. And this is a central hub where like our members share resources, opportunities, and participate in meetups, hackathons. So we have a global community of around 1900 plus members right now, and we are really very excited to announce our today's very special guest. So I will just have Vic Agarwal on board, and I'll just quickly introduce him. So Vic Agarwal is a product leader at Meta on the Horizon team, which is a part of the Metaverse initiative. And with 15 years of experience at top gaming companies like EA, Dana, Machine Zone, Amazon Games, and Zynga, Vic has worked on over 3 dozen gaming titles, which is really a huge number, by the way, and have grossed billions of dollars. He is really an expert in driving player engagement, game monetization, and delivering world-class live operations. So, Vic, we are thrilled to have you here to share your insights and looking forward to the session.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited. I saw your posts on LinkedIn and I was happy you reached out. So, yeah, I'm really glad we have everyone here today. Are we ready to start?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Yep.
Let's go for it. So, today I wanted to talk a little bit about product management from the beginning to the end. What is product management? How do you get started? How do you find things and go on? So let's go through the agenda real quick. So I'll give you some background about how I went to college, how I went to grad school, and then how did I work my way to Meta. Then the basics of product management one-on-one and some analytics examples. And then if you want to become a product manager, how do you prepare for a career like that? And then the most important thing is how do you apply for the jobs and how what are the tips and tricks for that? I will say some of this is a little US centric, but I think the learnings apply overall. So let's get started. Right at the beginning, this is my blog. You can go find the long version of my journey. I've written a 10-page article about how I got my dream job in video games. I wrote that 10 years ago. But it's an interesting read, and that's actually what helped me crack into the gaming industry because I wrote about my favorite games. Because people would say, hey, Vic, when we meet you, we can tell you're really passionate about this subject, but we can't see that from your resume because you work in banking. So sharing your passions and showing your passion can really make a difference because you can't get that from a single piece of paper. So let's talk a little bit about where I started and how did I wind up at Meta. So you can see I worked at a lot of companies and a lot of different games. So I started at a Pune University in India. That's where I went for undergrad. I studied IT and computer science. And then I immediately went to grad school for computer security. That's something I love to do, but it was a hybrid MIS degree, which was half security, half management. And while I was there, I learned more about consulting. I especially loved the fact that you could do very different roles. So I thought this would be a great place to start, except that this was in the recession of 2008. So there weren't that many roles there. So I stuck to banking for a few years. And that's where I really fell in love with analytics. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. At that time, you couldn't do a degree in analytics. There weren't a lot of courses, but I really kind of liked applying the analytics to business and driving that. So I'm like, I don't think I can get that in banking, but I really want to do more in analytics. And I applied to the tech industry because that's what I was familiar with. But I realized that just because I wanted to work in tech and because I worked on a product and was a manager, that doesn't make a product manager. So I kept applying, and I wasn't getting calls. And then I went to a conference where somebody said, Vic, apply for what you know, not what you want to do, because people will hire you for what you know. So then I started applying for analytics roles instead of PM roles, and boom, I started getting call after call. I interviewed at many different tech and gaming companies, And that's how I got my dream job at EA. So once I started at EA, that's how I began my journey into product management. I started as an analytics manager, became a monetization manager at Pogo, became a product manager at DNA Games, where I started doing live operations and running game events. And then I wanted to do that at a big company, so I went to Machine Zone or MZ. For those of you who haven't heard about Machine Zone, Machine Zone used to have the top three grossing apps on mobile for almost 10 years. They would make $1 billion per year per game. So it was pretty cool making that kind of money on mobile games. And then I wanted to try doing something from scratch and try something different. So I went to Amazon Games. We developed a brand new game from paper all the way to games getting launched. I worked on a platform called Twitch Prime where you can get free stuff in your favorite games. And here was where I was like, hey, okay, I've done gaming for a while and I've done, making revenue, I've done operations. Is there something left in gaming or should I go to tech? And while I was wondering that, Zynga came up with this really cool opportunity, which was half gaming and half marketing. Half product and half marketing. And that's something I'd always wanted to do. People always said, Vic, you'll make a great marketer, but I never wanted to do that full time. So it gave me a great opportunity to learn more about ads and running ads in games by cross promoting them within various titles. And as you know, Zynga already has 2 dozen titles, so it was a really interesting problem to solve. And after I finished that project, I realized that hey, I have been in gaming for over a decade. Let's try something new. So that's how I made my way to Meta. I started working on Facebook Reels monetization and recently moved to the Metaverse project. So I'll take a pause. If anybody has questions about why I did something or what I did, happy to take that question. Otherwise, I'll move into PM 101. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. But if you have any questions, feel free to add them to the chat. I'm going to pause after every slide or two to take questions. So this is a very common diagram of product management. It's what a product manager is always at the center of the tech, the business, and the user experience. But what is how do you actually define that? That's what I want to go into a little bit. Oh, I see some questions there. I can take a pause. So Manik asks, what are your next plans? Honestly, I think this is like the second stage of my career. Let me step back. So I've done gaming, as you can see in the first two columns, and now I'm doing tech is very very different. There is a very new learning curve for me. I worked as a features product manager, now I work as a platform product manager. I can explain that a bit later, but basically the difference in feature, you're working a lot with design and very b2c work, whereas in a platform it's mostly internal and it's very deeply technical. So I think I'm just learning a lot of new things, and I think for the next 3 to 5 years I just want to learn a lot to figure out what I want to do at work. And then also outside of work, I enjoy mentoring a lot. I enjoy giving talks such as this. So maybe doing more of that, because I've realized there's more to work than just doing work from your 9 to 5, and there's a way to give back to the community. So I think a little bit of both. But a nice question. And Sana, thank you for the compliment. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but that's why I wanted to share the story about why I made those changes, because there's always a reason. When you see the resume, it's easy to say, oh, you worked at a lot of companies, but why? And that's why I wanted to share the details. So, moving on to what is product management, right? Everybody says we want to be a product manager, but what does a day to day look like? So, there's two important concepts I wanted to share. First, what does a PM do day to day? There's three things, starting with strategy, right? That's a lot of the why, right? Why do you want to make this product? Is there a need for it in the market? What does it look like long term? How are you going to make money for it? How is it going to benefit users? So it's a lot of the why. The second is the execution, right? And that's working a lot with engineering, design, data scientists. How do you make it happen, right? What do you need to implement? What do the timelines look like? What tech do you use? What is available? How much do things cost? So it's really making things happen. And the last part is leadership, right? A PM typically doesn't have teams reporting to him. So you're actually leading by influence. So if you're not a people's person, you don't like talking to a lot of people and kind of want to work alone, that won't fly as a PM, right? I've worked with probably 20, 30 teams at the same time. Yeah, and they can be from different functions, right? They could be five different engineering teams, five different PMs. I could work with legal and marketing and sales and data science. So there's really no end of teams. So leadership is a pretty important component of being a PM. The second part is, you hear PM, but there's a lot of, PM can be a product or a project or a program or a marketing manager. So what's the difference between these? So a product manager, as I mentioned, does the strategy, execution, and leadership, but does that from an overview level. A project manager or a producer or a software development manager, as it's called, typically does the day to day, right? They actually do the execution. So if I'm like, hey, I want a new button on my game and it should do X and Y, and I write the strategy for it, I work with the producer or the project manager on the plan, but they make sure it happens in this sprint by this date. We need a front end engineer and a back end engineer and some DevOps. So they take care of all of that, right? They're really the right hand man for the PM, and they make sure all the trains are running on time. So the roles are quite different. The third one is a program manager. So a program manager essentially manages different products or programs in this case. So let's say I am game one, but let's say at Zynga, right? You have five different game teams. A program manager would say, okay, we have five game teams, and then we have the ads team, and then we have the sales team. So I will work across these programs on a particular initiative, and they typically serve as the liaison between all of these teams and upper and senior management, typically VPs and the C suite. So it's working across things versus deep diving in one particular area. And then the last one is a marketing manager. So marketing is typically in two types in tech and gaming. There's brand marketing and performance marketing. Brand marketing is newspaper ads, billboards, showing things at Walmart, more like physical media. Whereas digital marketing is more about performance marketing, which is ads, looking at things online, having a budget, making sure it goes out across platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit. So they're really quite different skills. But that's what I wanted to share, that a PM does the strategy, a producer does a lot of the execution, a program manager looks across products or programs, and a marketing manager does ads in a short way. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll move on. Cool. Moving on. Yeah, I'm glad to know it helped you. Yeah, they are very, very different. So I'm glad, think about it. If you have more questions, we'll talk a little bit more. But now we have a little bit of a brainstorming exercise, and I'm hoping some of you respond. So, make it a little interactive. This is a real question. I've had this happen more than once. But imagine your manager comes and tells you that, hey, Vivek, the revenue fell by 50% last night. Look into it ASAP. What metrics would you look at, right, to understand, oh, why is the revenue falling since last night? So there's no wrong answer. It's more of a brainstorming question, but I'd love to know what you guys think. Oh, definitely analytics, but there's particular analytics you would want to look at, right? I'll give you a few examples. You would want to look at the total number of people who were there, right? Or the total revenue. So what kind of analytics would you want to look at? I mean, I have these answers on the next page, so I'm not going to keep you guessing for long. But if you have any guesses, happy to hear them. Okay, keep those answers coming. I'm going to move on. So when you look at the detailed examples, right, the first and most important thing is to see, is the revenue still falling, right? Because you're saying that the revenue was falling, if it's still falling, then it's a very different priority. You want to stop it from falling immediately. But if it has stopped falling, then you can kind of go into deep dive mode and look at it. Logs and monitoring is a really interesting one. I have that here as number 8, right? To see, is the analytics system actually reporting correctly, right? The system could be down and your logs will show you that, right? The second is the game or the product working? So if your game isn't working and there's some issue, maybe you pushed a patch last night and it's causing your game to go down. Maybe that's why your revenue is falling. The third one is your daily active users. Maybe last night you had 1 million people playing and today there's only 100,000. So why is that, right? The next one could be its revenue. So maybe the sales in the last 24 hours fell down, right? Maybe you released a bad sale and people just don't like it. The next one is maybe the active payers aren't there. So maybe you still have 1 million people playing, but out of 1 million, let's say 10,000 pay every day. Only 1,000 payers are there. So why are the payers not coming? Yeah, did we add a new feature? That's a great point, right? So that's similar to sales, right? Did you add a new feature? Maybe A, they don't like the feature and the DAU went down. B, maybe they didn't like, maybe it took the game down and the product is not working. And then you can keep going from there. You can look at average revenue. Maybe the payers are paying but only paying $5 instead of $10, right? Maybe your user acquisition went down. Maybe you get a lot of people from India, but today there aren't any people. So is the marketing not working in India? And then, as Weber said, right, is the analytics system actually working? You look at the logs and monitoring. So if you see, right, there's a lot of different things that could happen, and this is what a PM looks at. So when my manager comes and says, "Hey Vic, what's happening? Why aren't we making money?" It's my job to kind of figure out what it is. You start with the high level or the critical. Is it still falling, and is the game working? And then you kind of get to the next level, which is, hey, what do the numbers look like? And then you start doing kind of deeper dives like user acquisition and payer revenue and so on. So that's a few examples of what is the kind of job I actually do. Now, hopefully, the revenue doesn't fall every day, but yeah, it does happen sometimes. So, okay, maybe sounds cool, sounds fun. You want to be a PM. How do you prepare for that? So a very common reason is, hey, I'm an engineer, but I don't really want to be an engineer anymore. Let me become a PM, right? Oh, I don't want to work on the tech side. I want to work on the business side. Let's become a PM. Oh, it sounds exciting. That's why I want to become a PM. But why, right? Like, not wanting to do something is not the same reason as wanting to do something else. So the first thing is, a PM role typically requires experience, and that's an important reason for that, because you are a domain expert. So if you don't know the domain, you cannot be an expert. And at least in the US, associate product manager roles are very, very rare. I'd say maybe across the country, maybe a few hundred, maybe 1,000, but there's just not that many. So you really need to know an industry. So could go in another field, and then you work your way up to that. uh, and you also need to bring more than one skill set to the table. As I mentioned, you could be working across team. So if you're a great engineer, that's nice, but you need a little bit more than that. So the most common roles that actually switch and work well with PM, the number one is analytics, because you kind of live and die by the numbers, as I showed you in the previous example. So if you can just write some basic SQL and work on some dashboards, at least you need to know that. And if you're a detailed analyst, you're a data scientist, that's the most common field I've seen switch to PM. The second one is marketing. As I mentioned, you need to understand the user really, really well. And because marketers do that all the time, that's a pretty natural switch as well. Then you start getting a little bit more to the tech side. So if you're a project or a program manager or a software dev manager, you could move there. Your super skill set is that you can be more technical than other PMs. So if you do like a platform product role like mine, you would be, maybe you have an edge over there. But you may not know so much of the marketing and the analytics side. And then the last one is, if you're an engineer, right? It can happen. There's no reason why it can't. It's just not as common, because engineers, want to typically deep dive on one subject, and they want to kind of work with their immediate team, whereas PMs have to work across dozens of teams and have to work across a wide area. So that's a few reasons about thinking out, why do you want to be a PM, and what kind of roles you could do before you work into product management. what else can I do? So this is something I get a lot. Hey, is there a certification I can do as a product manager? I like Manik's comment after quitting as Spider-Man, Peter Parker where to become a PM. That's pretty funny. Well, we have Dwight Schrute here. So yeah, so that's all about the fun of interviewing. Yeah, so certifications is something that I would say you don't do. Yes, it's kind of nice if you want to learn something, but just having a certification doesn't really matter. As I mentioned, that experience is what the main thing is. So similar to how I talked about my blog in the beginning, you need to show that, like, why do you want to get into this field. So for example, for video games, I wrote a blog about my favorite games, right? Now this was 15 years ago, so you didn't have TikTok. Right, today maybe you make some short videos, maybe you write a blog, maybe you make your own game, right? You start a newsletter. It's about interest and experience more than just, hey, I want to be in this space. I already mentioned there are very few APM roles. The only role I know that directly switches to PM in the US is if you've done an MBA in the US and you want to switch. Typically, they can come in as a PM or a senior PM, but that is also getting a little rarer, but still possible. And as I mentioned, experience or demonstrated interest, and by demonstrated interest, I mean the blogs, the videos, and so on, trumps certification and degrees most of the time, right? Like, yes, it's nice you have a degree in product management, but do you have the day to day experience? Right? Like, if I was hiring and I had somebody with 2 to 3 years PM experience versus or analytics experience versus somebody with a degree, I would actually go for the analyst most of the time instead of the PM degree. I mean, it's nice, but it's theoretical knowledge. But if you had a degree and experience, okay, now that's pretty cool. And the last one is, people really underrate this, but focus on what you enjoy and honestly give a shit about, because the work is always hard. So if you don't enjoy it, it's going to get very boring very fast and you're not going to want to work in it. That's how I chose video games, because when I was at Citibank, I said I love analytics, but I don't want to do this day to day on large, corporate B2B project. What is it that I really love to do? And back in India, I would play a lot of video games. I was a competitive gamer back in the day, playing in tournaments. So I said, I love doing this, but I didn't even know this was a real job. So if I could have any one job in the world, I'm like, I want to work at Rockstar on Grand Theft Auto or Blizzard at Diablo. And that kind of guided what I wanted to do. And even though I was an analyst at EA, I kind of worked my way towards that. And that's the main thing, right? Don't be a PM because you don't want to be an engineer. Be a PM because you want to be a PM, and then figure out what kind of PM you want to be. Maybe you enjoy finance, or you want to work in fintech. Maybe you're really passionate about healthcare and you want to work on a healthcare startup, an ed tech startup for education. So really focus on what you enjoy. I should underline this. I'm going to underline this in my next talk, but it does really, really matter. Otherwise, you're just going to get bored at work. Thank you, Manik. I see you're enjoying the session. Glad to know. Keep putting in questions if they come up. I'm moving a little fast because there's a little bit of content left. But I will also do Q&A after, because I don't want to preach to you. This is not a lecture. So just, yeah, let me know what you think. The next one is how to apply for jobs. And I know it's almost lunchtime there. It's way past dinner time here. So I put some good foodie stuff on the slide. But typically, LinkedIn works a lot better than applying on job websites, works a lot better than Indeed and other generic job portals, which are just terrible. So this is the recipe I generally give to all my mentees, and I'm happy to share it with everyone here. It's tried, it's tested. I do it every time. I've had at least a dozen mentees do this, and they typically start getting interview calls in a week. Now, obviously, nothing is guaranteed, but it does really work for a few different reasons, and I'll explain that. Right, the TLDR of this is that you reach out to the recruiters directly on LinkedIn versus trying to apply on websites and for it to glow into a black hole. And because you've reached out to the recruiter, you made their job easy. You're getting a resume to the right person. Right? It's not the hiring manager that reviews resume, it's the recruiter first and then the hiring manager. And it's very difficult to have hiring managers and figure out who they are, but recruiters is easy to find. So before I start, there is a question from Devane. Would internship be considered experience if you want to get PM roles fresh out of college? So yes, they would be considered as experience, but I will say it is very, very rare to get a PM straight out of college. Maybe in India it could be different, but I know in the States that is not really a thing. Except for, as I said, the associate product manager roles, and they are very, very competitive. Like, at a company like Zynga or even at Google, right? You would probably have maybe a dozen, maybe a few dozen people in all of Google coming in every year as an APM. So it is possible, and internships would be a leg up. But I will say APM roles are very, very competitive. So unless you think, yes, I have excellent experience, there's no harm in trying. I would typically say try and do something else that is related, like analytics, marketing, engineering, or become an SDM, and then work your way into product, because you can, but you won't know a lot about the industry and what you're trying to do if you're fresh out of college. So this is what I recommend to people who are already in the industry, or they're trying to switch, is think about what domains you want on a Saturday, right? It's a 1 week recipe. Just sit down on Saturday. All you have to do is think, right? What domain do I want? Tech, banking, healthcare, fashion, right? And pick one or two domains, because if you kind of spray it out, right, there is a little bit of difference in your experience. You won't have experience in all these domains, right? Like I went from banking to tech and gaming, and that's it. Right? If I started applying for healthcare tomorrow, I'm just not going to get a call. And if I do, they're going to ask me. The first question will be, why are you interested in healthcare? And it shouldn't just be, oh, because I want a job, right? Nobody will give you a job for that reason. So first, really do some soul searching on that day about what domains do you want to apply in. The next day, make a list of 25 companies that you want to apply to. And there's a reason why I say 25, because you don't want to, it's happened to me so many times. I want to apply for a job. I'm like, okay, I want to apply for a job today. Which company should I apply for? Should I apply for a big company, Meta or Google? Should I apply for a smaller one like eBay or Yelp? Or maybe I want to, I'm just sick of this. I want to do finance. So you're confusing two or three different things, right? You're confusing the reason you want to do it versus which company you should apply for. So you do it day by day. Day two on Sunday, all you do is make a list of companies you want to apply to. And then on day three, which is Monday, that's when you actually start applying. What you do is that you go to LinkedIn and connect with 5 recruiters from each company. So let's say you want to apply at Yelp, right? You go to LinkedIn, you type in Yelp recruiter, and all the recruiters will show up, right? Now, if you're applying for an engineering role, you look for technical recruiters. If you're applying for a director role, you look for a leadership recruiter. If you're applying for a PM role, you look for a product recruiter, maybe not a technical, but all the other recruiters should be fine. And you connect with 3 to 5 of these recruiters, right? Just go connect, 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 connect. Why do you connect? Because typically recruiters connect back because that's their job, right? Two, you don't want to use up emails and pay for stuff, so this is free, it's easy, right? On day one, you've made 5 searches for 5 companies and connected 5 recruiters each, and you're done. 20-30 minutes, easy peasy. Day two, now you go to number 6 to 10 on your list and you apply for those, but you'll also have people from day one who would have connected back with you, right? And to them, you want to respond with a very simple email showing interest, right? Hey, I found some great open positions at Yelp. I'd love to chat about those with you. That's it, right? You can attach your resume if you like. You can kind of A/B test that a little bit, but you don't want to write 3 paragraphs, right? Like when I get emails, or I know recruiters get emails like, "Hi, my name is this. I work here. I have studied here and here. My experience is X and Y. I am looking for a product management role. Can you help me?" I'm like, dude, like, do your work. Like, look at my company. Are there any open roles you're interested in? Right. And I don't need your background. I can see that in your resume. Just tell me what you want. So, in this age of TikToks and reels and short form videos, get to the point. 2 or 3 sentences max. Right. That also helps you write to a lot more recruiters. So, you do this on Monday, you do this on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And by Friday, you've done 25 companies, 5 recruiters each. That's 125 recruiters. If you have your resume in front of 125 recruiters, typically half won't connect back. So you're down to 60. Of those who connected, maybe 20-30 won't reply. So you're down to 30. They will reply to you, and then they'll say, oh, maybe apply on the website. Or some will say, oh, I have a role, or let me refer you to my colleague. And you'll probably get like 10-ish interesting people, and out of them, eventually when you get to interviews, you'll get 2 to 4 interviews. So it took you 1 week, right? That's not a very long time in a job hunt process. Give it a try. If it works for you, great, let me know. If it doesn't work for you, definitely let me know, because I want to hear what your experience was, and maybe I can tweak this slide. But it is something that I have seen work for myself and my mentees. So give it a shot, right? 1 week is not that long. And the last slide, which is tips and tricks, is remember, the bigger company you go to, the more unique that interview process is. So if you're at Amazon, they do what is called leadership principle based interviews or behavioral interviews. Meta and Google do case study interviews. Maybe if you go to healthcare, they would have a different interview. So be sure, like, it's not the same interview type. So you want to make sure that if you're applying for some of these specific companies, you're ready for how they interview. And believe me, the first time I did, I was not. And when it doesn't work out, or you're getting feedback, and then suddenly you have to scramble to learn like what is new. So make sure you actually know where you're applying to. The second one is insights and tips. So on your resume, right, there's 2 or 3 things that I always recommend. Number one, focus on impact and metrics. It's easy to say, but a lot of people, I'll give you an example, right? They are like, I worked on, let me say, I worked on launching a new feature, working with the marketing team because the client asked me so, and it increased profit by 20%. Great. Why are you putting the 20% at the end, right? I would say increase profit for Fortune 500 client by implementing X and Y, right? Put the juice up front, put your impact, right? Put it in bold, right? A lot of people don't do this. They have no bold on their resume. I am going to scan your resume in 30 seconds, which is point number three, right? I would challenge you, go give your resume to a roommate, to a friend, to your mom and dad, right? And say, read this for 30 seconds. Tell me what you understand from my resume and take it back. And believe me, what they tell you is what everybody will understand from your resume. So do that test with somebody. Let me know how it goes. But I've seen that work really well, because you know your resume well, but when you give it to a fresh person, they're stumped and they have to do it very quickly. Like when I was hiring for a role in a previous company, I got 100 resumes. Do you know how long it takes to go through 100 resumes? Right? If I'm reading each one for a minute, that's almost 2 hours of just sitting and reviewing resumes nonstop. So you're going to be very, very quick about it to see if something stands out. And then the last one is, which actually I'm going back and forth, number two, which is add a line or two about what the company and team do and what do you do. Because if you're like, oh, I worked at, I don't know, ZS Associate, great, but what does the company do and what do you do? Right? Or you're like, hey, I work at this startup, a fintech startup, great. What does the company do? Does it do microloans? Does it do mortgage lending? Does it do something else? So give me a line, because I see so many companies and I'm like, I have to Google it. If I have 30 seconds, unless the candidate's interesting, I'm not going to Google it. So, make it a little easier on the people reading it. I'll take a second before interviews. There's a question from Devane. Would you recommend MIS or different courses for masters? Sure, it depends on what you're trying to do, right? So maybe you can tell me about why you would want to do a MIS, right? Is it to get into product? Do you want to learn more? Are you trying to get into that bridge between product and between tech and strategy? Right? I did a MIS degree with a concentration in security, but this was before there were MIS degrees anywhere, right? Like I remember when I had applied, there were 3 big schools in the US. I think that was UT Dallas, Carnegie Mellon, and John Hopkins that had MIS degrees. No, none of the other universities had them. So I think it depends on what you're trying to do, right? Yes, if you're trying to become a PM, it's not bad. I mean, I know people with a master's in analytics, with a master's in product management. I think even that's a degree now, right? Or a MIS degree. So I think there's no wrong degree. It just depends on what you're trying to do and why you're doing the degree in the first place. I'll actually share this, right? I was going to do my MBA. I told my dad that, hey, I want to take a year, right? I was brainstorming with him about what to do for my career. And I said, give me a year. I want to take a crack at gaming and see if I can do it. And if I don't, I'll go do an MBA and, switch careers then. But at that point, you've been working for 4 or 5 years, and MBA costs $100,000 to $200,000 in the US. plus 2 years of lost wages that people don't count. So if you're earning, let's say 50,000 or let's say $100,000, you're going to minus 200 from not earning for 2 years, and another minus 200 because of your MBA loan. So it's a very, very expensive proposition. And similarly for masters, except that it's a bit cheaper. So I'd say really think about why you want to do your MIS. So coming to the interview part, is the most common question that people get wrong is, tell me about yourself, right? I'll give you two examples. I'll introduce myself in the wrong way and the right way, right? Hey, I'm Vic. I studied at Carnegie Mellon. I worked at many, many companies since. I worked at Deloitte and Citibank, and then I started in gaming. I worked at EA. I did this and this role at EA. I worked at DNA after. I did product management. I worked at Machine Zone. I worked at Game of War and Mobile Strike. I worked at Amazon. Dot 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 dot. Most of you would have already tuned out. They're like, dude, he's going on and on. Believe me, I have time people, they go on for 3 to 4 minutes, and I went on for like 30 seconds or less. So keep it short and sweet, man. Like, the most common thing I say is, let me know if you want more detail. Give the choice to the interviewer versus just taking up all the time. So a good answer would be, hey, I'm Vic. I've been a PM for a decade in the gaming industry. I worked at many companies such as EA, Amazon Games, and Zynga. My last role on the Facebook Reels team was doing user pay and monetization, where I helped creators make a living and users could tip creators to appreciate their content. Currently, I work on the Metaverse initiative doing X and Y. Let me know if you want more details. That's it. Easy, right? And let the other person say, oh, you worked at EA? Tell me more about your journey at EA. Or, oh my God, you worked at Mobile Strike? I love that game. Tell me more. Or then say, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Okay, let me ask you this case study question. So let them drive the interview. Don't take over the interview. The second one is, if you're doing case study questions, time yourself. That is something I was very, very bad at. So if somebody is asking you a case study question like, uh, would you add more ads on Reels than there are today? Right? Okay, that's a great question. Let me think about that. And what a lot of people do, including me, honestly, when I started this, is I would start writing and start answering within 10 to 20 seconds. I would be, okay, Reels and ads. Okay, this is the structure I'm following. This is what I'm doing. Okay, ding, ding, ding. Okay, let's start. Right? I don't want people to wait too long. But that's not true. 2 to 3 minutes is something that's very comfortable, especially at the beginning, and you want to solve the whole problem quickly at a high level so that before you start talking in a case study question. So make sure you time yourself, give yourself time to think. Nobody minds, right? Yes, if you're starting 5 or 10 minutes, yes, people will say what's up, but if you take a couple of minutes, it's fine. And the last thing is, when you are doing interview questions, don't read them, actually practice. So, and what I mean by that is, I see a question. Oh, tell me about a time when you had great difficulties at work. Oh, yeah, I knew I'd do this project. Okay, next question. No, sit and practice, right? Hey, the time I had difficulty at work is when I worked on this project. In this project, this is the summary of it. These are the details of this. This is what I achieved in it. Practice it, talk to somebody, mock with your partner, your friend, your roommate, your parent, right? Because I used to read through questions and I'm like, oh yeah, I know this. But when it comes to practicing, it takes time. Like, even for this talk, like, I have given probably 2 dozen talks before, not this one, but I've given others. But even for this, I practiced today. I practiced for 15 minutes today. Hey, what are the slides? What is the flow? What do I want to say? Right? Do I know my story? So even though you do it many times, practice a little bit. I think that's the last slide. Let's see. That's it, right? So happy to take more questions now. I'll let them trickle in a little bit. Uh, and if you want to hit me up on LinkedIn, search for Vic Agarwal. I'll leave one more slide here. Leave me a testimonial if you like the talk. I'm actually writing a book which I'll publish next month. So if you leave your email address here, I'm happy to send you a free copy. It's going to be about product management and navigating product management. I'll have a few famous people from the industry being interviewed in it. So yeah, I'd love to send you a copy. Cool. We have some questions. Let's answer these. So Webov says, I'm working in cybersecurity right now, and I've been doing a little bit of project management as well. But I want to know more about gaining enough experience that needed to pivot to PM. So cybersecurity is great. In fact, I did my master's in cybersecurity, so totally get it. And project management is a great skill, right? Maybe that's something you want to pursue full time. But if you want to go to product, I think the main thing is honestly just on the job experience. I don't know what you do right now if you're an engineer or if you're doing a different kind of role. But the main thing, if you're going from engineering to PM, which I'm going to assume, I'd say work more and more with your PM, because for example in Meta there's a role called a tech lead, which is basically a very senior engineer, and I work hand in hand with my tech lead to do the strategy, to do the breakdown of project, the scoping, the t-shirt sizing. So if you work your way into that, then and they obviously help you with the project management, right? Like what is the timeline based on the t-shirt sizing, how many engineers do we have, how many iOS, Android, backend, front end, all the good stuff, right? So then I'm doing product work with them. So if my TL wanted to become a PM tomorrow, I would highly recommend them because they know the execution through and through, and they're pretty decent at the strategy, but they'll need to focus a little bit more. So if you're an engineer, do a little bit more of product strategy and just get involved in product with heavy PM presence and tell the PM, right? Hey, I'm interested more in learning about product. Can you tell me more? Can you tell me what to do? Because honestly, PMs are people. PMs are people too. We love helping others, so they'll probably help you out. You're into security consulting, kind of. Oh yeah, so you do offensive. Okay, I understand security consulting. So consulting is actually something that comes pretty naturally to PM. So I know consultants switching straight to PM. So in consulting, I'd say get involved in more strategy kind of project where you have to make pitch decks. You're doing broader strategy for the client versus just implementation level details. Because if you have the strategy bent for it, then the other part is the execution and analytics. So as long as you because I won't say leadership, because if you're in consulting you work with enough people, so just understand what are you missing between strategy and execution and just work on that. But if you're in consulting, it's a pretty easy PM switch. uh, I'll take Akash's question next. How is the boom of AI impacting product management? What would aspiring PMs understand and prepare for with AI's growing influence? Good question. I know the AI part, but let me think about what PM should prepare for. I think it's about having kind of a digital buddy in a way for me, because I don't have to now think of everything myself. I have a sounding board. So I think if anything, you have a lot more support now with AI. So for example, if I want to write an email to a client, right, I think my English is pretty decent, but I can always run it by ChatGPT or MetaMail and just see what they say. And a lot of the time, they polish it to a degree that you cannot spend the time on. Like, yes, if I spend an hour writing and finessing that email, I can probably get pretty close. But if I want to do it in 2 minutes, AI helps me with that, right? I'm making a slide deck. I need some images. I need a custom image for, let's say, security offensive consulting, and I want to show a client, and some bad people coming in there. I can just run DALI on ChatGPT and just get an image. So that's what it helps. It helps makes manual tasks a little bit easier, especially the writing part, because PMs have to write a bunch. So I think that definitely helps. And then obviously, when you get into the individual work streams, right, then it based on your product and based on your vertical, there's a massive amount of impact on AI. But for aspiring PMs, I'd say use the tools that are out there and show your interest, because most projects have some AI bent right now. What are you using and why are you using it? Give it a purpose. I think that will really help. Manik, is there any good template for resume you recommend? Because there are many in the market, oh, perfect, great question. So if you go to my LinkedIn, right, you will see my resume template there. Honestly, it is the most generic and simple template there is. Right, it's just I don't know if there's a way. I'll have to like shut down sharing and all. But if you go to my LinkedIn, it's there in the files section, and you can see the resume over there, and it's very simple. In fact, do not please put the graphics on it or funky templates, because the ATS system, application tracking system that companies use, they get broken when you use funny templates. So keep it simple, keep it clean, leave white space there. That is what typically helps the most. Yeah, and if you have questions, hit me up on LinkedIn. uh, Manik, any great resource for starting in the field of PM? Well, I'm hoping some of this really helped. But do you have a specific question around like what are you trying to do? Because I think what I shared today is first, Why do you want to be a PM? Think about that, right? Two, then what role are you in right now? Right? Are you an engineer? What kind of engineer? What field do you want to be in PM, in the PM space, and so on and so forth. Cool. Ayush. So Ayush says, do PM professionals also contribute into analytics along with business analytics? Oh yes, absolutely. Right. So I would say your two, well, I was going to say your three right hands are going to be marketing, analytics, and your SDM, right, or your project manager. So analytics is something I work on day by day. I work with my data scientists and data engineers pretty much every day. And like for example, I'm a platform PM right now, which is deeply technical, so I actually am authoring docs with them. I'm diving into what are our data pipelines like, what are the analytics we are generating, how much overhead do they cause, how when do we need to compress them. Like you can get into a lot of details, but there's also the other side, right? I know, for example, at Amazon they have PMs and PMTs, where the T stands for technical. So PMs and PMs who are technical. I don't say TPM because that's a different role where you kind of work technically across products. But they have a PM role, which is all about writing. You write a ton of docs at Amazon. It's all about strategy and very little execution. So there are roles that don't require analytics, but I will say more often than not, they do, and you'll have a leg up if you can do some basic business analysis. Siddharth has a question about, do interviewers focus on soft skills for PM roles in states? Yeah, soft skills is everything, right? As I mentioned, the third part is leadership, right? So being able to talk to various people and understanding what they're saying is critical, right? When I talk to an engineer and I'm like, hey, what are your priorities for the product? They'll say, well, I'm using this tech stack. I think with this and this feature is good, but this one is really difficult technically. I think we need 2 more weeks for this one is really easy. This one I really need help. I need a data scientist. Can you help me find a data scientist? Great. When I talk to the DS, we'll talk metrics. Right? When I talk to legal, I'll be like, hey, I'm putting this new feature out, right? What do you think legally? Like, do you think this is allowed by the company or not? Right? Then I go to marketing. I'm like, hey, what ads are you guys running? What do the creatives look like? So you need to be able to talk to everybody and understand what they are saying. So not soft skills is the communication, but also the understanding. So yeah, if you can't have a great conversation or don't want to, maybe you just don't want to be bothered by people, PM is probably not the role. But then there are other great roles like project management or deep dive technical roles that you can do. Mrunang says, how important is it to have a portfolio when applying for PM roles, and what should be included in a strong PM portfolio? So for this, let me go back a little bit in my deck real quick. I will give you an example. So here, right, the main thing is to show experience, right? So it's not a portfolio like an artist portfolio where you're showing drawings and illustrations and 3D graphics. It's about showing, if you're not a PM already, right, then you want to show why do you want to be a PM and why in this domain. So like I was it was like a senior analyst role, but it was kind of a half product role at Citibank. And I was applying to be a product manager at EA. Why would they ever look at my resume? I was based in New York. EA was in the Bay Area in California, across the country, right? Why would they even look at my resume? They would be like, why is this weird consultant analyst guy from New York in banking? And everybody think banking is finance. They kept calling it finance. Finance applying for a video game job. It doesn't make sense. And they would reject my resume. But what I did is that I wrote my blog at the top of my resume, Geeks Mirage, and I said that, hey, I'm an avid gamer who writes a lot about gaming. Please check out my blog. And when people did that, they saw that I had written about games, and they saw I did some deep dive analysis about games, and they're like, oh, okay, this guy gets it. He's trying to switch. Okay, that makes sense. Let's give him a shot. So having a portfolio of things you are interested in, things you have demonstrated why, is good enough, right? And it can be at work too. So like somebody mentioned earlier, let me scroll up, like Webber said, right, he's in security consulting. So a great thing would be apply to another security company as a PM, and you already have the background. So that makes it a lot easier. And why PM? You can say, hey, I worked on a project with my PM for the last 2 years. I was a tech lead for them. I understand what's needed. And then you work your way. Typically, I actually didn't say this earlier, so it's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up. it's very easy to switch within the same company. It's much harder to switch outside company. So if you've been working with as a tech lead with your PM for 2 years, and his manager knows you, his or her manager knows you as well, you can make a case. Hey, you have a new opening on a team. I'd love to apply for it. And they know you, they know your work. They may give you a shot, right? Maybe you'll have to do an interview loop, but you'll get a shot. Whereas if you're applying externally, it's a lot harder. So I always say, use your experience within the same company, find a PM role, and then keep switching outside. If you go directly, it's a lot harder. Perfect. That's all the questions I see. If there are any last questions, let me know. Otherwise, we can call it a day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vic. It was really amazing listening to you. Especially, I am in the internship hunt right now, so the recipe that you shared is really very helpful.
That's
So
great.
I'll surely try it out and let you know the results.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for your book right now. I
Yes.
will be registering for it. So
Yes.
yeah, thanks a lot for your time. It was really nice to have you. It was really nice to learn about product management, different roles which are too confusing, and people mostly think that all of those come into product management. So thanks a lot for that. We had a great audience today. Everyone was really getting out their questions, and thanks for answering everyone's doubts. So yeah, looking forward to staying connected with you. Thanks a lot. And thank you everyone for joining. Make sure that if you want to join our community, you can join us on Discord. This is the link. It is also present in the description. So thank you everyone for joining. See you once again in our upcoming events.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. It was great.